The Scifi dominion was feared across the galaxy. Their warriors were strong, their fleets unstoppable, and their princess, Helvera, was their greatest weapon. She had crushed rebellions, defeated warlords, and brought entire civilizations to their knees. Her name was whispered in fear. But when her father, Emperor Kelzar, summoned her to the grand throne room, she sensed something different. A challenge, perhaps. She welcomed it. The Emperor sat upon his massive obsidian throne, his glowing yellow eyes studying her. Around him, Dominion warlords and advisors stood in silence. A massive hologram flickered above them, a planet, blue and green, with white clouds swirling over vast oceans. Earth, the Emperor said. His voice was deep, commanding. A newly discovered world, a primitive species. Helvera narrowed her sharp, violet eyes. If they are weak, why do you call for me? They refused to surrender. A ripple of shock moved through the court. The Scifi dominion had conquered hundreds of planets. When they arrived, civilizations bowed. None had resisted. None had dared. Helvera smirked. Then I shall make them kneel. The Emperor's expression remained unreadable. Do not underestimate them. Their technology is not as advanced as ours, but they are unpredictable. His eyes darkened. Go to Earth. Demand their surrender. If they refuse, show them what it means to defy the Dominion. Helvera placed a fist over her chest in salute. As you command, Father. The arrival. The Dominion fleet arrived in Earth's orbit like a shadow swallowing the stars. Giant warships, sleek and black, surrounded the planet. They could destroy cities in an instant. On the surface, Earth's governments sent desperate transmissions. Some pleaded. Some threatened. Some refused to believe this was real. But one message caught Helvera's attention. It was short. Simple. We do not surrender. It came from Captain Elias Rourke, commander of Earth's defense forces. The meeting. Helvera's flagship descended toward the human capital. She chose not to bring an army, only a few elite guards. She did not need protection. She was the threat. Inside a grand hall, Earth's leaders waited. But Helvera's eyes locked onto one man. He stood at the front, arms crossed, watching her without fear. Elias Rourke. He was tall, strong for a human, with sharp blue eyes that held defiance. Unlike the others, he did not flinch as she approached. Helvera removed her helmet, revealing her striking violet skin and long silver hair. I am Princess Helvera of the Scifi Dominion, she declared, her voice carrying through the hall. Your planet is now under our rule. Surrender, and you will be spared. Elias raised an eyebrow. That's not how we do things here. Some of the human leaders looked panicked. One whispered urgently to Elias, but he ignored them. Helvera tilted her head. You understand the power we hold, human. She gestured to the sky, where the Dominion warships hovered like silent predators. Your weapons are weak. Your armies small. Your surrender is logical. Elias smirked. If we were logical, we wouldn't be human. Helvera studied him. He was not reckless, not foolish. There was something else. Confidence. She stepped closer. Do you believe you can fight us and win? Elias met her gaze without hesitation. I believe we won't bow without a fight. The room was silent. Then Elias did something unexpected. He took a step forward, standing barely inches from her. The tension in the hall was thick. Since you're so sure of your strength, he said, why don't we settle this another way? Helvera narrowed her eyes. Speak. A duel. You and me. One-on-one. Elias said. If I lose, I'll convince my people to surrender. If I win, you leave. The humans in the room gasped. Some protested. One shouted, Are you insane? Helvera laughed. A deep, rich sound. She had not been challenged in years. A duel? You, a mere human, challenge me. Elias smiled. Unless you're afraid. Helvera's amusement faded. Fear. No one had ever dared imply such a thing. "You are either very brave," she said, "or very foolish. Maybe both." A slow grin spread across Selvera's face. She liked this human. He was different. He did not beg. He did not tremble. He fought with words as well as warriors. "Very well," she said. "I accept your challenge." The fate of Earth would be decided in battle. The news of the duel spread like wildfire. Across Earth and among the stars, people whispered in disbelief. A human challenging a Scifi princess. It was madness. Selvera was the finest warrior of her people, trained since birth to be an unstoppable force. No one had ever bested her in combat. Yet here stood Captain Elias Orc, a mere human, staring her down with unwavering confidence. In the great hall where the challenge had been made, Earth's leaders whispered anxiously. Some called Elias reckless. Others saw him as their last hope. Selvera, however, was intrigued. She had fought countless warriors, but never a human. She wanted to know what made them different. "You understand," she said, her voice smooth but firm, "that this duel will not be a simple contest. If you fall, your planet falls with you." Elias shrugged. "I understand." Her violet eyes studied him for a long moment. "Very well," she said. "We fight at dawn." The arena. The next morning, the sun cast golden light over a vast open field outside the human capital. It had been chosen as neutral ground, far from cities, far from interference. A Dominion warship hovered above, watching like a silent predator. Hundreds of human soldiers and officials stood on one side. On the other, Selvera's elite guards stood motionless, their eyes glowing faintly beneath their helmets. At the center of the field, Elias Orc stood tall, rolling his shoulders, stretching his arms. He wore simple combat gear, no heavy armor, no advanced weapons, just his mind, his skill, and his determination. Across from him, Selvera approached, clad in lightweight Scifi battle armor. Her silver hair was tied back, revealing sharp violet features. A curved blade rested at her side. "You may choose your weapon," she said, tilting her head slightly. "I offer you that honor." Elias smirked. "I'll stick with what I know." He lifted his fists. For a moment, Selvera was silent. Then she laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh. "Hand-to-hand combat. Against me." Elias simply nodded. Selvera shook her head, intrigued. "Very well, human. Let's see what you can do." The air was thick with tension as the two warriors stepped forward. The watching crowds held their breath. Then, without warning, the fight began. Strength versus strategy. Selvera was fast, faster than any human should be able to see. She moved like lightning, her first strike aimed directly at Elias's ribs. But he wasn't there. At the last second, Elias twisted, barely dodging the blow. He countered with a sharp punch aimed at her shoulder, a feint. She dodged right into his real attack, a knee strike to her side. It wasn't enough to hurt her, but it surprised her. Selvera smiled. Interesting. Then she attacked in full force. A whirlwind of strikes came at Elias, each one powerful enough to break bone. He dodged some, blocked others, but the force of her attacks was overwhelming. A heavy kick sent him rolling across the ground. Dust flew into the air. Selvera stood tall, waiting. Is this all humanity has to offer? Elias wiped blood from his lip. Not even close. Then he moved. He wasn't faster than Selvera, but he was unpredictable. His style was unlike anything she had faced. Fluid, adaptable. He didn't just react. He anticipated. He used her strength against her, slipping through openings she didn't even realize she had. For the first time in years, Selvera was forced onto the defensive. She blocked a strike, then another, but Elias kept coming. A low kick, a sharp elbow. He was relentless. Selvera grinned. Finally, a real fight. The turning point. The battle raged on, neither warrior giving an inch. The onlookers watched in awe, humans and aliens alike. Elias was bruised, his breathing heavy. Vera had never fought this long against a single opponent, but she was still stronger, faster, more experienced. With a sudden burst of speed, she swept Elias's legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard. Before he could move, she was on top of him, pinning him down. Her blade was at his throat, her breathing steady. "It's over," she said softly. Elias didn't struggle. He met her gaze, and then he smiled. Vera hesitated. For the first time, she realized she was looking at a human who did not fear death. His body was beaten, but his spirit was unbroken. "Go ahead," Elias said. "End it." Silence. Then, slowly, Vera withdrew her blade. She stood up, looking down at him. "You are unlike any warrior I have faced, human." Elias pushed himself to his feet. "And you're not as heartless as you pretend to be." Vera blinked. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The tension in the field broke as whispers spread. The duel had ended, but not in the way anyone had expected. Finally, Vera turned to her soldiers. "The duel is concluded." She looked back at Elias. "Earth will not fall today." Then, in a move that shocked both sides, she extended her hand. Elias hesitated for only a moment before shaking it. The fearless alien princess had met her match, and for the first time in her life, she didn't know what would happen next. The battlefield was silent. Vera, the unstoppable warrior princess of the Scifi Dominion, had ended the duel not with a blade, but with a handshake. The sight shocked both humans and Scifi alike. Her elite guard stiffened, unsure if they should intervene. The human officials whispered among themselves, struggling to understand what had just happened. Captain Elias Work stood tall, wiping the blood from his mouth. He wasn't the strongest fighter. He wasn't the fastest. But he had stood his ground against an alien warrior who could have broken him in half. And now she was looking at him with something new in her violet eyes. Respect. The aftermath. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, both sides returned to their camps. There was no declaration of war. No immediate attack. Vera had promised that Earth would not fall today, and her word was law among her people. But she remained curious. Later that evening, aboard her flagship, she sat in her private chamber, replaying the duel in her mind. Elias's movements, his unpredictability, his refusal to surrender, it all fascinated her. The humans were weaker in body, but they had something more, something the Dominion had never encountered before. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she commanded. The doors slid open, and her second-in-command, Commander Zarek, stepped forward. His dark armor gleamed under the cold light. His expression was unreadable, but Vera could sense his disapproval. "You should have killed him," Zarek said bluntly. Vera raised an eyebrow. "And why is that?" Zarek's jaw tightened. "He defied you. He challenged you. The humans must understand their place. Mercy is weakness." Vera stood, her presence commanding even without armor. "Is that what you believe?" "It is what the Dominion believes," Zarek said, voice firm. She stepped closer, her violet eyes piercing his. "Then tell me, Commander, why did none of our enemies fight as he did? Why did they always kneel before us, while he stood until the very end?" Zarek had no answer. Vera smirked. "Strength is more than muscle and weapons, Zarek. That human proved it." She turned away, her mind made up. "I will speak to him again." An unexpected invitation. The next day, an encrypted message arrived at Earth's military base. "Captain Elias Work, you intrigue me. Meet me on neutral ground. Princess Vera." Elias read the message twice, then chuckled. "Well, this is new." His advisors debated whether he should accept. Some feared it was a trap. Others saw it as an opportunity. But Elias didn't need convincing. He had faced the princess in battle. Now he wanted to know what made her tick. He sent a simple reply. Name the place. The meeting. They met in a secured, abandoned outpost just outside the capital, neutral ground where neither side had an advantage. Elias arrived first, waiting under the evening sky as the wind rustled through the ruins. Then the sound of approaching footsteps. Silvera walked toward him. No guards, no weapons, just her presence, which was more powerful than any armor. She studied him as if he were a puzzle waiting to be solved. "You accepted," she said. Elias smirked. "Curiosity got the better of me." She nodded. "I have questions." "Go ahead." She tilted her head. "Why did you fight me?" Elias folded his arms. "Because surrender isn't an option." Silvera frowned slightly. Other civilizations surrendered to the Dominion without resistance. They knew they had no chance. Yet you fought anyway. That is not logical. Elias chuckled. "Humans aren't always logical." He gestured around them. "We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because we refuse to lose. There's a difference." Silvera considered this. "You fight for survival." Elias shook his head. "Not just survival. Freedom. Choice. We fight for each other." He met her gaze. "Tell me, princess, when was the last time you fought for something other than the Dominion's orders?" For a brief moment, something flashed in her expression. Uncertainty. Thoughtfulness. It was gone before Elias could be sure. She stepped closer. "You are unlike any warrior I have known, Captain Rourke. And you're not as heartless as people think," Elias said. Silvera's lips curved slightly. "Careful, human. Flattery will not save you if war comes." Elias smiled. "Who said I need saving?" A dangerous realization. Their conversation lasted longer than either had planned. They spoke of war, of strength, of their people. And as they talked, Silvera felt something dangerous creeping into her thoughts. Doubt. For years, she had believed the Dominion was the pinnacle of power. That no race could challenge them. That to resist was foolish. And yet Elias Rourke had resisted. He had forced her to stop and think. Could it be possible that the Dominion was wrong? As the night deepened, Silvera knew one thing for certain. Humanity was not weak. And if she wasn't careful, they might just change everything she thought she knew. Silvera returned to her flagship after the meeting, her mind unsettled. The stars stretched endlessly outside her window, but for the first time, she felt uncertain about the path ahead. Elias Rourke was different. She had fought many warriors, but none like him. He wasn't the strongest, nor the fastest. Yet he had stood his ground against her, not just with his fists, but with his words. He had planted a question in her mind, one she could not ignore. Did the Dominion's strength truly make them right? A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Her second-in-command, Commander Zarek, entered. He bowed slightly, then straightened. His dark armor gleamed under the ship's artificial lights, his face as unreadable as ever. "You met the human again," he stated. Silvera turned to face him. "I did." Zarek's golden eyes narrowed. "Many believe this is a mistake." Silvera arched an eyebrow. "Do you?" Zarek hesitated. "I believe the Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species. They must submit or be destroyed. That is our way." Silvera studied him for a moment, then walked past him, her voice steady. "Perhaps our way is flawed." Zarek stiffened. "Princess." She stopped but did not turn back. "Prepare my personal transport. I will return to the surface." Zarek's jaw tightened. "You risked too much." Silvera's violet eyes gleamed. "Then let us see if the risk is worth taking." An uneasy alliance. Elias stood outside the military base, watching as the Dominion ship descended. The mere sight of it made his fellow officers nervous. Aliens weren't supposed to land peacefully on Earth. But here she was. Princess Silvera stepped out, flanked by two guards. She wore no battle armor, only a form-fitting uniform that signified her royal status. Her silver hair shimmered in the sunlight as she approached. Elias met her gaze. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." She smirked. "And yet, here I am." Behind Elias, his officers whispered, uneasy. "Sir, this could be a trap," one muttered. Elias gave a slight nod, understanding their concern, but he didn't believe Selvera had come to kill him. If she had, she wouldn't have come alone. Selvera studied the humans around her. "Your people still fear me." Elias shrugged. "You did arrive with an invasion fleet." Selvera chuckled. "A fair point." She crossed her arms. "I did not come here to fight. I came to talk." Elias's expression became serious. "Talk about what?" She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I want to understand your people, your defiance, your strength." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You mean you want to know why we didn't kneel?" Selvera nodded. Elias considered her for a long moment, then gestured toward the base. "Then let me show you something. The true strength of humanity." Elias led Selvera through the base. She expected to see weapons, military strategies, anything that would explain Earth's resistance. Instead, she saw people. Engineers working tirelessly to repair damaged systems, medics tending to wounded soldiers, some who had fought against the Dominion's initial attack, civilians bringing food and supplies to those in need. Selvera frowned. "This is what you wanted to show me." Elias nodded. "This is why we fight. Not for power, not for conquest, for each other." She watched as a group of young soldiers helped an injured comrade walk. Despite their wounds, they smiled, their spirits unbroken. Selvera had seen warriors before, fighters who would do anything to win. But this was different. "You fight because you care," she murmured. Elias nodded. "Exactly." He turned to her. "The Dominion fights to control. We fight to protect." Selvera remained silent, something shifting in her heart. The Dominion had always taught her that strength was everything, that those who resisted were weak. But this wasn't weakness. This was something far greater, a dangerous truth. As night fell, Selvera stood alone, gazing up at the stars. Elias approached, his hands in his pockets. "You look deep in thought," he said. She exhaled slowly. "Everything I have been taught, everything I believed, is being challenged." Elias smirked. "That's how change starts." Selvera glanced at him. "And if I change, the Dominion will turn against me." Elias's smirk faded. He knew the risk she was taking. The Dominion was not kind to traitors. "You have a choice," Elias said. "You can keep following orders, or you can decide for yourself what's right." Selvera looked away. It sounded so simple when he said it. But defying the Dominion meant war. It meant turning against her own people. It meant risking everything. For the first time in her life, Selvera was afraid. But deep down, she knew one thing. She could not turn back now. The weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on Princess Selvera as she stood on the rooftop of the human military base, staring at the night sky. The stars above were familiar, yet suddenly they felt so distant, just like the life she had known before meeting Elias Rourke. She had been raised to believe that the Dominion was absolute, that their power was law, and that any civilization that resisted was foolish. Yet here on Earth, she had seen something she had never encountered before. Humanity fought not for conquest, but for each other. She gripped the metal railing tightly, her mind racing. If she truly accepted this truth, then what did that make her? A warrior? A ruler? Or something far more dangerous? A traitor? A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You planning to leave without saying goodbye?" Selvera turned to see Elias approaching, hands in his pockets. His expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. "I was thinking," she admitted. Elias leaned against the railing beside her. Dangerous habit. Zelvera smirked. For someone in my position, yes. There was a brief silence before she finally said, "The Dominion will not stop. They will return in greater numbers. My people do not accept defiance lightly." Elias exhaled. I figured as much. She studied him. He should have been afraid, yet he wasn't. He was prepared to fight, even against impossible odds. "Why are you so calm?" she asked. Elias shrugged. "Because I know one thing for sure. And that is," he met her gaze, "we don't break easy. The choice that cannot be undone." Sudden beeping on Selvera's wrist device made her stiffen. She tapped the holographic interface, and the image of Commander Zarek appeared. His expression was cold, unreadable. "Princess," he said formally, "you have been gone long enough." Zelvera straightened. I needed time to assess the situation. Zarek's eyes flickered toward Elias. "You have assessed enough. The Dominion grows impatient." Zelvera narrowed her eyes. "What are you saying?" Zarek's voice was emotionless. "The High Command has ordered a full-scale invasion of Earth. Our fleet arrives in 2 planetary cycles." A chill ran down Zelvera's spine. "They did not wait for my report." "They no longer need it," Zarek replied. "This world will kneel, as all others have." Zelvera's jaw clenched. She had suspected this moment would come, but now that it was real, she felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping into her chest. Rage. Elias, listening in, exhaled sharply. "Well, that didn't take long." Zelvera ignored him. "If I return now, will they reconsider?" Zarek tilted his head slightly. "If you return, you will lead the invasion. That is your duty, Princess." Silence hung between them. Zelvera knew what was expected of her. She was royalty, a warrior, a symbol of Dominion supremacy. And yet, she looked at Elias, at the base filled with soldiers who fought for each other, at a world that refused to be broken. She knew what she had to do. Her next words changed everything. "I will not lead this invasion." A flicker of emotion crossed Zarek's face, perhaps shock, perhaps anger. Then his voice turned cold. "You are making a grave mistake." Zelvera's fingers curled into fists. "No, the Dominion is making a mistake." For the first time in her life, she was defying orders, and she wasn't afraid. Zarek exhaled slowly. "Very well, Princess." The transmission ended. "The war begins." Elias let out a low whistle. "Well, that was dramatic." Zelvera turned to him, eyes burning with resolve. "The Dominion will see me as a traitor now." "Yeah," Elias said. "I figured." She faced him fully. "You should be more concerned. Their fleet will arrive soon. You are outnumbered, outgunned. The Dominion does not lose." Elias smirked. "Then they've never fought humans like us before." Zelvera let out a small chuckle despite the tension. Even now, he remained defiant. A part of her had once thought it foolish. Now she found it inspiring. She exhaled. "I cannot fight them alone." Elias nodded. "Then you won't have to." Zelvera gave him a long, searching look. For the first time in her life, she was fighting not for the Dominion, but for something greater. For freedom. And if war was coming, she would fight it on the right side, beside humanity. The air inside the human military base was thick with tension. Soldiers rushed between command stations, preparing for the inevitable invasion. The Dominion fleet was coming. And this time, they weren't here to negotiate. Elias Rourke stood at the center of the command room, studying the holographic map of Earth's orbit. Red markers blinked aggressively. Enemy warships, hundreds of them, were already on their way. "How long until they arrive?" Elias asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. A nearby officer, his face pale, responded, "Less than 48 hours." The room fell silent. They all knew what that meant. Earth was outnumbered, outmatched, outgunned, yet none of them would run. Elias turned his gaze toward the far end of the room, where Scifi stood alone, staring at the holographic display with unreadable eyes. She had betrayed her people for this, for them. Now she would have to face the consequences. A leader without a kingdom. Outside, beneath the dark sky, Scifi stood in the cold wind, lost in thought. She had given up everything. Her title, her home, her people. The Dominion had always taught her that strength was absolute, that those who resisted would be crushed. But now she saw things differently. Elias had shown her a truth the Dominion feared. Strength wasn't about control. It was about standing for what was right. Footsteps approached. She didn't have to turn to know it was Elias. "You okay?" he asked. She exhaled. "My own people will try to kill me now." Elias gave a small chuckle. "Welcome to the resistance." She smirked, but the humor faded quickly. "They will not hold back, Elias. The Dominion does not accept defiance." He nodded. "And neither do we." For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the stars. Then, Scifi said, "You should let me go." Elias frowned. "What?" She turned to face him. "If I leave, they may delay the invasion. They might think I was taken against my will. You could use that time to prepare." Elias crossed his arms. "And what happens to you?" Scifi hesitated. She already knew the answer. "They will imprison me," she admitted. "Or worse." Elias shook his head. "Not happening." Scifi studied him. "This is bigger than me. You need to think about your people." Elias met her gaze. "I am." Scifi expected to see logic in his eyes, a calculated decision. Instead, she saw something far more dangerous. Loyalty. "I didn't ask for your help," she reminded him. Elias smirked. "Yeah, well, you got it anyway." The final stand begins. As the hours passed, the human base turned into a war machine. Engineers worked without rest, strengthening defenses. Pilots prepped for battle. Soldiers trained relentlessly, knowing that victory wasn't guaranteed, but surrender was never an option. Scifi stood in the strategy room, surrounded by Earth's military leaders. All eyes were on her. They didn't trust her yet. She understood that. But they needed her knowledge. She pointed at the holographic map of the incoming Dominion fleet. "Your best chance is to break their formation. The Dominion relies on precision. Disrupt that, and they lose efficiency." A general frowned. "And how do we do that?" Scifi met Elias's gaze. "We give them a target they can't ignore." The plan. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was their only chance. The plan was simple. Scifi would fly a stolen Dominion ship toward the invading fleet. She would broadcast a false distress signal, making it seem like she had been captured. The Dominion, believing their princess was in human hands, would hesitate just long enough for Earth's forces to strike first. A trick, a gamble, a single moment of hesitation was all they needed. Elias didn't like it. "They'll kill you if they find out it's a trick." Scifi smirked. "Then let's make sure they don't find out." A dangerous goodbye. The next morning, as the stolen Dominion ship prepared for launch, Scifi stood at the boarding ramp, looking at Elias. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Elias said, "You don't have to do this." Scifi smirked. "I do." Elias exhaled. "I know." She stepped closer. "If I don't return." Elias cut her off. "You will." Scifi hesitated. "Elias." Before she could finish, he reached out and clasped her wrist in a firm grip, a human gesture, a promise. "I'll see you after the battle," he said. Scifi nodded. And then, without another word, she boarded the ship. The gamble begins. As the Dominion fleet drew closer, Scifi's stolen ship launched into space, heading straight for her former allies. She activated the distress signal. A hologram of Commander Zarek appeared before her. His golden eyes were cold. "Princess," he said slowly, I see you have finally come to your senses. Zelvera forced a pained expression. I was captured, she said. The humans planned to use me as leverage. Zarek studied her. For a moment, she feared he would see through the lie. Then he nodded. You did well to send this signal. The fleet will adjust course. Zelvera's heart pounded. It was working. And down on Earth, Elias watched from the command center, his fists clenched. Now, all they had to do was wait. The battle for Earth was about to begin. A deep silence filled space. The Dominion fleet moved like a massive shadow across the stars, their warships glowing with energy. Their arrival should have been the beginning of Earth's end. Yet, for the first time, they hesitated. Inside the stolen Dominion vessel, Princess Zelvera sat in the pilot's seat, her hands gripping the controls tightly. Her distress signal had done its job. Commander Zarek had believed her lie. The fleet had adjusted its formation, delaying their full attack. Now, the humans had their only chance to strike first. Through the communicator, Elias Work's voice came through. It's go time, Zel. You ready? She exhaled, steadying her nerves. As ready as I'll ever be. Elias chuckled. Then let's make history. The first strike. Far below, on Earth, the human military base erupted into action. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bunkers, their sleek crafts soaring toward the enemy. Artillery stations powered up, missile silos opened, and battle-ready soldiers prepared for the fight of their lives. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for freedom. Zelvera activated the ship's engines and darted straight toward the Dominion fleet. If she was going to betray her people, she would do it completely. The enemy ships had their shields down, a crucial mistake. They still believed Zelvera was their captive. Commander Zarek, she said over the Dominion channel, I'm bringing in my ship. Prepare for boarding. Zarek's voice was calm. Understood, Princess. He had no idea that she was leading the human attack. The first human missiles struck the Dominion battleships with precise accuracy. Explosions erupted across the sky, throwing the fleet into chaos. The Dominion had never been ambushed before. For the first time, they were unprepared. The betrayal is complete. The Dominion's confusion didn't last long. Princess, Zarek's voice turned sharp. What is happening? Zelvera didn't hesitate. She deactivated her Dominion transponder and switched to the human battle frequency. Her voice was strong and clear. This is Princess Zelvera of the Dominion. I stand with Earth. The Dominion will not take this planet. A long silence. Then Zarek's voice came through, cold and filled with fury. You are a traitor. Zelvera's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. No, Zarek, I finally see the truth, and you're afraid of it. The communication cut off. And then the full force of the Dominion fleet awakened. The battle turns. Dominion warships fired their weapons, unleashing energy blasts that ripped through Earth's atmosphere. Human forces retaliated with everything they had: missiles, railguns, and experimental energy cannons. It was chaos. Zelvera's ship twisted through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire. She was no longer a princess. She was a warrior of Earth now. Elias's voice came through the communicator. We need to take out their command ship, or we won't last. She checked her scanners. The Dominion flagship loomed ahead, massive, unstoppable. But everything had a weakness. Elias, she said, I have an idea. A dangerous gamble. The Dominion relied on hierarchy and order. If they lost their leader, their forces would fall apart. That meant taking down Commander Zarek. Zelvera pushed her ship to maximum speed, heading straight for the command vessel. Elias, realizing what she was doing, cursed. You better not be planning what I think you are. Cover me, she said. I'm going in. Elias groaned. I hate this plan. But he didn't stop her, because he knew it was their only shot, the end of the Dominion's reign. Zelvera's ship smashed through the outer defenses of the command vessel. Alarms blared. Dominion soldiers ran toward her ship, weapons raised. She leaped from the cockpit, blaster in hand. There was no turning back now. She moved like a shadow, cutting through enemy forces with precision. The corridors were familiar. This had once been her home. Now she was here to burn it down. She reached the command deck. Zarek stood waiting, his golden eyes burning with rage. "You were meant to rule," he growled. "Now, you will die a traitor." Zelvera lifted her weapon. "No, I will die free." Zarek lunged. The fight was fast, brutal. Blades clashed, fists struck, blood was drawn. But Zelvera had something Zarek didn't, a reason to fight. With one final strike, she sent him crashing to the ground. The Dominion leader was defeated. She turned to the control panel and activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. "Elias," she said into her communicator, breathing heavily, "get your people clear." "What about you?" Elias demanded. Zelvera smiled. "I'll find a way out." She hoped. Victory and a new future. As the Dominion flagship exploded in the sky, the remaining enemy forces lost formation. With their leader gone, their discipline crumbled. Human forces pushed forward, driving them away. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over.